the Office Center product suite is very extensively utilized. Not only is Office Connector installed and available to people just as part of your Sage investment, that is called Office Connector Starter. So there are 6 templates that everybody can have access to, and your Sage security can limit people in the office from being able to refresh data you do not want them to. So that's handled in your Sage security. And I'll go a step further to say that the way we're going to be talking about using technology today to drive a process, we can pull data and refresh it into a formatted workbook, but we can also utilize it to communicate back to Sage from within Excel. So essentially, Excel becomes an extension of our Sage. So if you're concerned about whether someone has the ability to do that or you want to control that, rest assured that you can with the Sage security. And there's also a capability inside of Office Connector called Office Connector Administrator, and you can limit who has access to what licenses and so on and so forth. So the software is very extensively used. As I said, every Sage customer has Office Connector installed, but over 2,500 customers have made the investment to on one or more of the different technologies I'll show, with over 10,000 concurrent uses out there. And we think it's because it's not only easy to set up and learn and use, but you can accomplish process enhancements in ways that you couldn't accomplish otherwise using this technology. It's really the most powerful way to utilize the technology. So beyond just reporting, beyond dashboards, beyond analytics, to truly drive a process. And we have various different webinars that we talk about this. I'm going to bring up a few examples having to do with project cost forecasting, and another example having to do with, conceptually, you could think of it as pro forma or what have you, construction-based. But these pieces and parts are the elements that we can take to the nth degree, the most sophisticated, perhaps, use of this kind of technology. And that's what you're going to see here today. And again, you'll see a recording. So if there's some part of this that you want to share with other folks in your office, you'll be able to do that. So the Office Connector product suite, again, we're going to be spending time in Excel, but you're still connected to Sage. So essentially, Excel becomes a Sage technology by use of this added capability. So when we think of being in Excel, we're not pushing data into Excel. You can do that, but this is far beyond that, light years beyond that. Instead, you're already in a formatted workbook. Behind the scenes, you see an image, it looks like a cost forecast workbook, and we'll actually be using something like that today. But the goal is that you can build what you want and then with a click of a button have it refreshed. So that it's important that be able to happen, because we can't do the other things that we're trying to do with this kind of technology to change how you function as a business, to be more efficient, more effective. So we not only need to be able to query, to pull the data in, but we need to be able to communicate back to Sage, and we're doing that by way of write and or import. And you use one or the other depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And the example I'll show you today will actually use both. It'll use all 3 of these products to accomplish something desirable. Now, I want to challenge you to think about what I'm showing you, the examples, and think about other things in your business that are tedious, time-consuming, that you could transform. And Excel then becomes a very, very much more powerful technology than even what you probably previously thought about, and it eliminates the objections. IT people especially, many of them object to people using Excel. And I was, being a programmer, I kind of had that opinion originally before I realized what you could do with it. But we've eliminated these objections. The data, you're not typing data in manually. It's not getting outdated. You've eliminated that. And you're using Excel to your greatest advantage, to socialize information, to interact. And you can do it. It's a living, breathing, organic process that you simply just can't accomplish with paper, a piece of paper you print out and have to share, or even with a report that's printed on a screen. So this is far and above what you could accomplish with things like Crystal or Report Designer, or really anything. That's what you'll be talking about today. Now, there is another element of query called financials. We're not going to talk about that here today, but if you're interested in financial reporting, we have a presentation that goes into depth on the advantages of Excel-based financial reporting using Office Connector. So the technologies that we're going to be using, again, are query, write, and import here. And if you don't already own this technology, you can talk to your customer account manager or your business partner about what Sage calls the Power Pack. And that's the query designer, write designer, import designer, and financials that is available at a very attractive price. And we want you to utilize this technology because of the things that I'm going to be demonstrating here. Office Connector and Sage together, there's not another ERP that can produce the kinds of results that we can. And I'm not just talking about that, you're going to see it here right now. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring up my Sage. I'm going to go into Sage and start talking about certain concepts. So here I have a Sage desktop and I have a variety of different applications. You're probably familiar with this. And I can have people who have favorites, and they go into certain tasks and whatever that may be one or another parts of this. And I have reports and whatever. I'm just going to pop into job cost. Now, if you use project management, the tables that I'm talking about that we're going to be pulling from or writing to, project management uses the same tables. So the way the software is designed is efficient. So even though project management is a separate application, and there's things that the ways that you interact with data in project management is different than in job cost, it still is utilizing the same job cost tables. So by communicating to a table, the information is available to see in PJ as well. So for convenience, I'm just going to bring up the job cost application. I'm just going to launch the application because I want to stay in there and talk about certain things, the things that this presentation resonates and is based on. So there's a number of areas when I've been affiliated with this technology for 35 years, so in all sorts of different capacities. And during the 90s, my partner and I had the largest independent consulting company implementing this technology. So been working with it, taught it, used it for a long, long time. So in job cost, you have jobs, and you can think of them as projects. And below that, you might use extras. This screen might look different for you because from one person to another, if you're not using extras, this option may not even be there. Or it may have a different name because you can customize it. But the concept is there is something below a job, the detail. And below that, or maybe below the job, are cost codes, ways to break a project into pieces. And in this case, most often, these pieces are construction specification institute, ways of organizing costs. So cost codes then, they don't have to have categories in Sage, but most people, have categories. So if I come into, say, that table, so now I'm in a screen. I'm in this is kind of programming I did originally way back when I was hired by Tuan. But in this screen, I would have a job, I have an extra and whatever, and I could set up a new one, or I could look at existing values. Look here, there's the status of this category. Now, when you use Sage, this status can change. It could start as unstarted, but as you put cost in, it could automatically change. And then look, it has estimated and revised and actual start and completion dates. And I could maintain this one right here. And I could change the screen and go to another one and another one. And here's its cost account. There's totals. So as I use Sage, as I enter invoices, or I do my payroll, or I put in direct cost, put in an estimate, these totals, not only are there transactions that are in detail files, but they can update this hierarchical structure. So I say it's a hierarchical structure because categories are underneath, if you use them, are underneath cost codes. And cost codes can have groups of cost codes. So they have those totals, and then that goes up to the job, or the extra, and then the job. So it's a hierarchical progression when you do posting. And this is one area that data is stored. These numbers, the cost and estimate data, and also when I bill, that could be at a certain level. So the data is in two different areas. It's in the detail tables, but it's also in these accumulated tables. And this is just part of it. The category is one area, and the cost code and the job. Those are one set of tables, but there's another set of tables that are for like commitments. When I create a contract, that like a purchase order subcontract, even if I use the purchasing module, it still feeds this. This is where I have my contracts between me and someone else, and I can then enter invoices against it. So transactions are created. Those invoices are updating these totals, but they're also updating this accumulated table. And look over here, there's change orders. What are those? Well, you probably know what they are. I'm not going to go into that, but they may have originated through a change management process, and from PJ or contracts or what have you. There's also a table here. So no matter where you put the data, it's still ultimately going to update that table right there. So there's these tables that are accumulated, and then there's this structure. And when we talk about this structure over here, this concept of job, extra cost code category, whatever you call it, other people refer to as a work breakdown structure for Sage. So that it's normal work breakdown structure. Now, if you know estimating, that name means actually quite a lot of things. So now I have these tables, and I need to make sure that we are all understanding these are actual costs. But when the project starts, there's no estimate. The structure may not even exist, and you may import an estimate, and now you get an estimate into the system, and that the structure begins to form inside of the job. So that's part of the process. But there are many other things that you could use this technology to accomplish. And I want to touch on that. And if your background is in cost accounting, finance, some of what I'm covering may be a bit alien to you, but it's still construction oriented. If you're operational oriented, you're probably going to go, oh yeah, that's exactly, people need to know this. So this presentation isn't just informative about using Office Center, it's about using Sage more effectively. So when I first started teaching people, I didn't know much about construction back then, but I might tell someone to come in to enter estimates, and they would have gotten a report from somebody, and they'd enter a job, an extra cost code category, and they'd enter an amount. They'd enter another one and another one. Well, this isn't how it's estimated, probably. If you're using this Sage's estimating, there's a lot more detail underneath this. And that's how you come up with an estimate. Or a project manager may be working in Excel with more detail, but yet you have to represent it here this way, because why? Because this is how we cost information, track it from an accounting standpoint. So we have a job cost ledger, that work breakdown structure, and we also have, of course, a general ledger that these two things interact with. But we have this other area that what I expected things might cost, how I think about building a project, how I think about managing a project. So the concepts I'm talking about today, it touch upon all of these aspects, every single one of them. And there's a lot that has to do with this that doesn't always get covered during implementation. People aren't always aware, but Sage is extraordinary in its value and what it has to do. Now, so when I used to teach people how to enter estimates, if I was working with a project manager or whatever, they might say, well, why am I doing this if I've already entered commitments? Why am I doing the estimate here? And I'd have to navigate this. So the concept is I might have what I think something might cost, $20,000, but I might be able to get it bought out, be able to get a contract with someone for $18,000. Good for me, right? Now that's maybe profit. That's my goal. That's my hope. I need to manage a project, so I come in under budget, right? I shouldn't be telling people anything they don't already know. Well, when I first started teaching people to enter an estimate, they would put in all this and they'd put in an amount, a flat amount, like $50,000 for something. But in real life, that $50,000 just doesn't sit there. Actual cost happen based on things happening on your construction project. And cost accounting systems normally do not even think about it. They don't touch this. And I learned more when I implemented Fleur Daniel domestically and all over the world, for Timberline. I learned a lot more about how operational people handle things. There's scheduling, there's tasks that people have to perform, and they want to be able to account and relate these tasks with these costs. And you can do it. You can do it. This software is amazing at that. Now, So the thing I didn't realize when I was beginning with people is if I put an estimate cost of $100,000 or 80 or whatever, will that ultimately be the real cost? I don't know. So what happens is we ask people to do something, and that is to forecast. And I'm going to touch on that forecasting, project cost forecasting here next. But the other aspect that I never ever thought about is if I put $100,000 in here for something, when am I going to expend that money? I never thought about it. And I guarantee project managers generally don't think about it, but finance people do. It's cash flow, right? I'm not going to spend all $100,000 today. The more I can push out when I have to pay something, the better. And ideally, I'll have received money, or I've billed and received money, right? That juggling. And everybody on the call, if you have to deal with it, knows what I'm talking about. And that's the challenge of all this construction. Well, what does Sage have in it? And Sage always had this in it. I never thought about it when I was a consultant, but I'm going to tell you all about it right now. If I put an estimate in, if I wanted to represent that $100,000 about when I might expect it, like I'm at $20,000 this month and 15 that month, and that's my idea. When am I going to expend funds? Where in Sage can I tell it that kind of information? And the answer is Miscellaneous Worksheets. So what is Miscellaneous Worksheets? Okay. I remember when this was originally created, and I never thought about what I just was telling you. Because I didn't know how people might use it. So at each level, each of these cost levels that I've been showing of the work breakdown structure, if you come in and you look at the table, if you come over here, you're going to see Miscellaneous Worksheets. Okay, so there's 6 of them at the cost code level. And originally, when I first started, this was called Miscellaneous Cost Code Amount 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And anybody could use it any way they want. But at some point, Sage named these, pre-named them, which is great because then we could build reports that use it, and consultants could teach you. Put your forecasted amounts here. So I could put these values right here. Now, what's the beauty? Well, I'm just tell you the real beauty of these concepts, Miscellaneous Worksheets, is that see how this is just, it says cost at completion 14,000, blah blah blah. What is that made up of? These things can be backed up by transactional detail. So it's awesome. And it's not real money. It's not money that you've spent. It's not cost. It's not dollars paid. It's not a commitment. It's you're thinking, what if, the things that operational people need. That's exactly what this is for. And you can use it for all sorts of things, more than what I'm going to show you ways to use this exact same concept for all sorts of things here in this presentation. But how would I put that value into the system manually? Well, a consultant would teach you under tools that I can go and create a miscellaneous worksheet. I can give it a name. There's a whole bunch of them out here already, so I'll pick that one. And then I start telling it what columns are going to be on this worksheet. And the columns can be output fields, information that the person gets to see, and then data that they're going to put in. And when they identify data they're going to put in, they can say that data is either the total cost. So let's say my original estimate was $100,000, but now my cost at completion is $120,000. So I could put in 120, and that's my new cost at completion. That would be a replace value. Another way to put the value in is to put the delta. The current amount is 100,000. I'm expecting 20,000 more cost, so I'm going to put an add. It wouldn't say replace, it would add to of 20,000. I still get to 120,000. It's just how I think about it, how I use it. So I'm not going to go into more detail. If you want to know more about that, you can talk to a consultant or whatever. We actually have a more detailed project cost forecasting presentations that we do. And I've taught tons of these kinds of sessions on this at different conferences. So, but how would I enter it? Right here. I come into tasks, miscellaneous worksheets, and I pick something. So I pick cost at completion. And now I'm putting in my job, and I put in a date. That's going to be the transaction date right there. And now I'm putting my value in, right? I put it wherever. Now I'm not going to go into this, go in and type values, because I'm going to show you a different way to do this. How we first got involved with Excel-based types of projects was because of this right here. Operational people wanted to keep track of it, and they didn't have timely values on the status of projects. This is in the 90s, but accounting didn't want them in job costs using a license and typing things in, and they didn't want to do it anyway. And plus, they go, well, hold it. I have a whole bunch of stuff I need to see if I'm going to put in my projections. And it will kind of look like a grid, but this is really not Excel. It's not a grid. So it's an entry screen to get values in, but it's not necessarily as efficient as you might otherwise desire. And I'm not going to go into all of that. If you want to know more, we can chat. You can talk to people or email us in a follow-up. I'm just going to show you perhaps a better way to do it. So rather than go to tasks and enter miscellaneous worksheets there, I'm going to show you a different way. And the beautiful thing about this is there's lots of ways you could use miscellaneous worksheets. So I just want to touch on that. One way is I might put in my projections at either the category or cost code level. That's one way. But another way is maybe up here at the job. Let's say I've got a WIP report, or I don't know, I'm going to show you you can call it a pro forma. It's a revenue cost forecasting by job. But so at the job, I have a level right here. I've got all this information. You probably know this. You set up jobs. So I've got all this kind of stuff. And now I begin to start seeing other things, these accumulated totals. So by using the software, these values get updated. And then I have my estimate totals. And this is a representation of all that detail underneath it, the totals. And now I've got my cost and all this stuff. But now I've got my miscellaneous worksheets. So look here at the job level. Not only do I see those cost code level ones, and that's the total of all the cost codes that don't have an extra associated with them. There's another screen further down that has all these for if there's an extra associated with them. This is categories. If I put my forecast in, or if I use miscellaneous worksheets at the category, I can see the total for the job right here. So there are 4 at the category, 6 at the here, but I've got 3 at the job level, including a % complete that I can use. I can use them any way I want. So I'm going to show you a way you might use them right now. I talked first to you about project cost forecasting, and that's how this conversation begins. That's actually how I began to learn how people might want to use this technology back in the 90s, and until someone asked a question, I never even thought about it. So there are all sorts of project cost forecast type workbooks. I've seen people do it all sorts of ways. Hours to go, units to go, % complete, cost complete, cost of completion, who knows? And sometimes it's a mixture of a bunch of things. This is a template that's not on the Launchpad yet, but it's pending. It will be on the Launchpad, and it's available. We can send this to you if you're interested. This one's at the category level. There's another one at the cost code level. And this will explain all about the template, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you using it. So I come in here and I pick a job and I hit refresh, and it's going to refresh this workbook. So I've been doing this sort of thing with people for since 1996. Lots of people are doing this sort of a thing, not with Office Connector, but other technology. And the way that I've seen most people do this is when they generate this workbook, they typically have a folder on their network, let's call it forecast, and below it they have each of the project managers, and below that they generate this workbook and save it there. And then they do another job and another, and they have this for all their active jobs. Now, there are people who knows who's on the call. So depending on the type of business you have, you might want 1 row per job, and we would approach it differently. Just because this example doesn't reflect exactly the way you don't want to work, doesn't mean we can't address it. It just means that I can't show you an example that every single possible person on the call might use, but this should be close enough. It should show you the concept. So what am I seeing? It just refreshed out of Sage. Here's all my estimates, and here's all my unit related things. So I got estimate units actually, and then dollars. Over here, revised commitment invoiced. There's a little plus. I've got original, approved, and revised changes invoiced. I got the status of my project, and I'm using Excel to group things. And now I've got my forecasted amounts. Here's my cost related amounts over here, but I'll close that. Now I can forecast that cost to complete, cost at completion, units to complete, or units at completion. Any one of those things I choose, that's what this column will be. But what we found out is that different companies might have some rows forecasted one way and others a different way. So I could change any one of these. If I self-perform that, I could say this one's units to go, and I can use this. So I could generate this workbook and protect it, and then somebody operationally could open it. They can't change these values that are in Sage, but they could come in here and tell me what, the cost to complete. So my actual cost is this, my estimated, amount's this, but I could tell you right here, my cost to complete is supposed to be $54,000. And I have columns here that based on, like, if there's no values here, it's going to be based on this data. But because I put a value, now it's calculating a variance and all that. And this is real life. This is the sort of thing that you might need to do on a project. And we added another element that you could put in. The project manager, the operational person, can put in what they're thinking, right? Because why? What's the reason? And you can now review the project. You can also use the same one to refresh the data next month, and I'll have last month still here, but now I'll have the current month. So I'll have all my historical months all in one workbook. This is one way you might do forecasting. So it's great. And the other part is this can be sent back to Sage. And we don't advocate keeping things in Excel. You have a database for a reason. So you're using Excel as a more efficient way to work with data, but you still need to put it back into Sage. And another reason is there's a kind of company that really wants this information in your accounting. It's a surety and bonding companies. They want to know that your progress backs up your WIP reports, that you just didn't pull numbers out of the air. And when they see this kind of backup, I present this kind of thing at the construction financial managers conferences, and they love it. Bonding companies are like, oh my, that's amazing. So now I can send it back to Sage. I can either write it or import it. Now we recommend importing. Office Connector import job cost miscellaneous worksheets. If you get that, then you can tell it like where you want the values to go. So the cost to complete in category 1, the cost at completion and miscellaneous amount 2, the variance in 3, let's say. So now if I hit send values, it'll be like I went into miscellaneous worksheets and job cost and manually typed them. But who wants to do that? Why would you? Because you have to look at a report, type it, run a report to make sure you did it right. I mean, Plus the entry screen is not ideal. So this is faster, it's much better. Now, everything was good, everybody was happy, and then this is probably in 1998, this one CFO says, okay, they told me we've been using this and we love it, but I want you to lock this column right here. And I'm like, if we lock the column, how useful it is. And then she said, what I want you to do is put out every month, January, February, March, April, May. They're going to put their values over here, and I want this to update that. And I was like just trying to figure out what it is the person wanted. And I had somebody else on the phone like, oh, you're going to do cash flow. I'm like, huh? What's that? I mean, a consultant. I've been a consultant forever. I didn't even know what that was. And yep, she wanted from the beginning of a job that not only do they have the estimate, but they have an idea when that estimate's going to be expended. And as things change, what effect does it have on my cash? Because she wanted to be able to do cash flow. And in reality, what they do is they put in the cost, when they expect the cost, and when they expect the funds by month. That's what they did. So they were doing that. I mean, they're amazing. They've won awards. Because that's their competitive advantage. I'm not going to mention their name, but they're a Sage user and pretty amazing. When we thought, now you'd think that once I heard that, I'd be going, oh, everybody should do that. But I really didn't make sense to us. We didn't really know we just did it because that's what the person wanted. But it is fantastic to do that sort of a thing. And it didn't occur to me how useful it was until someone asked a different question, similar, at the job level. The person, it was a business partner looking at a very large customer who said, this person looking at Sage, they want to be able to put in their the 2 years of projected cost and revenue, or whatever it is, but they want to do it out for 2 years. Can you do that? Well, you can do anything you want in Excel. But the idea was, can it be sent back to Sage? And I told him, yeah, of course you can do that. And he was saying, well, okay, my consultants say you can't. Now, the consultants know better now, but I'm saying, well, it wouldn't be practical to do it in job cost the way it is, but with Office Connector, absolutely. And they wouldn't believe me, so we built this. So this is a workbook right here, and allows you, with this workbook, the information page will explain it all to you and what products are required. But I can come in here and pick the type of job, the project manager, whatever, and I can also look at that I'm going to be thinking about billings and cost, or cash receipts and dollars paid. So you could pick either one. Now, depending on what you pick, you tell it what miscellaneous worksheet amounts on the job that you want to store this in. But why? How can I do that? Because they were designed for you to use them any way you want. So I just now decided. Now, you need to look at your own, each person on the call needs to look at how you're already using miscellaneous worksheets, because I don't know. You don't want to just start changing things. But you could rename those, and I can even change their name in Sage. So it's called billings and cost, or dollars paid and whatever. So I pick those things out, right? And then based on that, I'm refreshing the workbook. I get this, 1 row per job. And what I'm getting here is through a cutoff date, through this as of date, right? I pick that date right there, put whatever date you want right there. And actually, that's not going to work for my database. I'm using, let's say 3/31/2015. Sorry, I have sample data. You have live data. Much easier. So let me refresh that. So I'm going to, in a moment, have a workbook that's already, so I'm going to have, they wanted to see the actual costs from this period backwards. But for future periods, they want to be able to put in their forecasted costs. So at the beginning of a job, of course, everything's forecasted. So I might have an estimate of, 1.2 million, but when do I expect that's going to hit? I need to know that. And when am I going to get money? So lots of finance people, higher level finance people, do this. I've shown this at conferences. People go, oh my God, I do that manually all the time. I'm like, why? We do it automatically. So they just didn't know. So here's revenue and cost. Here's your actual dollars. And here you type in your revenue and cost forecast, and it goes out 2 years. Now, there are people on the call right here who are thinking right now, I know because I've done so many presentations, can I go more than 2 years? And I think that's just greedy. That's just frankly, yes, of course, you can go out 10. Wouldn't matter. This would have to be changed, but yes, you can make it so that it can be out future years. So now I told you, you could just use it in Excel, but we don't advocate that. We want you to put this data back in Sage. Most ERPs you can't. They don't have this capacity, but Sage does. So why would you put the data back in Sage? Because it can be on other reports, right? Don't just isolate data in a certain workbook. That's why people criticize Excel. So think of this as a new application tied to Sage, because that's essentially what it's going to be. So how easy is it to do that? It's totally easy. Right? All these numbers, if I put them in there, if I go to the admin page here, all I have to do is hit create import file. Now, if you know Sage, you might say, well, hold a second, James, you're going to import miscellaneous worksheet entries. If I go over to job cost, you can import your estimates, your direct cost, and your commitments. An Office Connector import has features for each one of these. And you don't actually need it. If you know what format you need to create your file in, you can just put it in that format and import it. But Office Connector import will make the format, it'll let you work in Excel the way you want, and it will put it in the right format. But miscellaneous worksheets isn't on here. Well, that's okay, because we've created a special miscellaneous worksheet import capability. So it will, in fact, work. And so if I'm over here in this workbook and I say create import file, it can create it and it will create all those entries. Hundreds, thousands of entries, it will manually create them. And I guarantee you that's a lot easier than you going into Miscellaneous Worksheets and doing what you'd have to do. I mean, you wouldn't do it if I showed you how. You go, I'm not doing that. So it's easy. Now it's in Sage. You have a work process. But is this the pinnacle of what you could be doing? No. I'm about to show you something that is closer to the pinnacle. And so what I'm talking about is, let's think about, let's say I'm using Sage's estimating or whatever. I got some source estimating, but let's assume it's Sage's estimating. And I want to now create my job and I want to begin to put data in and then manage my job and all these things that I've been talking about, all in a workbook. And I'm going to show you, yes, there is a workbook, and that's this Expenditure Workbook. It looks simple, elegant. It was challenging to create. I didn't create it. My partner did, but you could pick a project and then you'd save it for this project and you could pick another one and another one. And the information page will tell you all about this. But when you come here and you hit refresh, what we're going to do is we're going to generate this worksheet for you. So this worksheet is pretty significant. It'll have every single, extra, cost code category with filter controls. And it's going to show you at the category level the status in Sage. And so if I open these things up, here's my estimated start and completion date. Now, do I have to enter them here? No. If you, instead of entering in a grid where you just put a value here and hit a button and it changes in Sage, if you want, you could come into setup, go into categories, hit next, edit it, find the other category, accept, hit that. You could do it screen by screen if you want, but why would you do that? That's one way to do it, and you're using a use of job cost. But if you do this, you're using Excel, and it's accomplishing the same task, but very quickly and efficiently. So I put the value here, and I tell it, put it in Excel. So Office Connector is not Excel-based reporting. That's just one small part of what it can do. It's transformative when it comes to business processes. I'm presenting data the way I want to use it, and I can lock down access for somebody. I can use Excel data validation if I want, so only certain things come in here. But if I put values in here, if I want to put those into Sage, all I do is I come to the admin page and I hit update status and schedule, and boom, it's in Sage. It doesn't immediately put it in there. If you were using something like Microsoft Access, which is not easy to use and maintain, but if you did, it changes it immediately in whatever it's connected to. And controllers especially don't much like that. I know from experience, by the way. But this is better. You put it in there, and then when you're ready, you hit a button, and it's in there. So it's showing me what's in Sage, and it's allowing me to change it. Could you build something like this yourself? Of course. If you had the designers that I'm talking about, you could think about what you want to do, lay it out, and produce something like this. And my partner did, so you can. So now that's my estimate. Now, when I first started with my estimate, I also had cost-related things. So here's my estimate. That could have come from Sage's estimating. I'm just pulling it right out, right? I'm looking at the transactions, pulling them out. And I have other things on this sheet. So I'm going to collapse things because there's so much to show you. That's a beautiful part of Excel is grouping, So here's my commitments. It's showing my current commitment amount. And over here, I've got my cost. Now, as you're looking at this, and I've heard, because I've demonstrated this a lot. So I've had people say, well, can I have a column for my estimate adjustments and put them in here and import estimate changes? Yes, you could if you wanted to do it. You have to think about how you use Sage and what aspects of change management in Sage you use. But you can import estimates and estimate changes if that's what you wanted. You just have to think it through. But yeah, pretty much people say if you think something up, you can do it with this technology. So over here, I've got my cost at completion, right over here. Well, so remember I showed you that forecast workbook that had one amount, and I told you what that person wanted us to do? Here you go. They could put in their projected cost by month. So they're breaking out probably their estimate as to when they expect to expend those funds. They put those values in here. Well, look, there's a date, January, February, March. So can we put that data back in Sage and have it be date sensitive? Yes, we can. How can we do it? Through import miscellaneous worksheets. If you say import cost to complete changes, it will create the transactions for you, and it will know the dates based on the columns, right? So you could put those values in. This is exactly what that person wanted. They just put the values in, and then you come over there and you send it into Sage. And then as the job progresses, you're changing these values over a period of time. And here's your projected over and under. Well, so now as you start to examine that, you might want some ease of use capabilities. And not everybody knows how to do this, but I've got some pretty smart people working with me. So let's say you started with an estimate and someone says, look, I don't want to, at the beginning of the job, look at the estimate and put this in there. Now, that other CFO, or she was a VP of finance, she would have said, no spreading. They have to do it because I want them to think about it. Like, I don't want them to just throw some number in there. I want to have a reasoning, and she'd want comments on this thing. And you could want it as well. But I could say, well, would it help if we spread the estimate and then they could just make an adjustment? Now, I'm pretty confident she would say no. She was tough, but boy, she ran a tight ship, and that's a good thing. So it's all up to you. Here it says including pending change transactions too. But if you click spread remaining estimate, it will, at the beginning of a job, it would take your estimate and spread it over time. If you have already started, then you've got your actual cost and you've got your estimate. So by row, there's a difference. So we'll calculate that difference, and then we'll spread that number across here. That's what it does. And so now you've got an interactive workbook with everything having to do with your job on it. And if there's more you want to add to this, you can. I mean, we were showing you filter controls so that you could only see certain rows if you wanted. We're using Excel's grouping so that I can just get to different parts. Like there, I'm grouping by this, or I could say I want to group by this. I mean, that's just Excel. So you probably know that you could do those kinds of things in Excel. So this is what I would consider the pinnacle of this, where you are taking the data perhaps from estimating, you're putting it into Sage. We demonstrate with the import presentation we do, importing estimates, like an estimate worksheet. But you can, if you have the import designer, you could, if you do your estimates in Excel and you just want to put import formulas in there, you can. And so now, boom, your estimate's in there. This sheet could then take those estimates out of Sage and allow you to use them in a workbook like this. So what I wanted to help you better understand the different ways you might work with your Sage information to more effectively drive work processes. There's all sorts of things that people do. We have cash flow reporting that people tend to want to get into, including projections of when they may receive or have to expend funds so they can play around. There's so many different ways to use this technology. Again, you just have to think about what you might want to do, and there's probably a very efficient way that your peers are already using this technology. I demonstrated this once at a conference, thinking like, oh, I've got something here, and the person had been using Office Connector, the product suite, for probably I think 10 years, and they go, oh yeah, we've been doing that for a number of years. I looked at the person like, well, why didn't you tell me? It's like, well, why would we tell, that's our competitive edge. We don't want to tell everybody what to do. So people use this technology for all sorts of things, and we're only aware of what people ask us to do or what we hear. But we want to get the word out, as far as, efficient ways to use technology. So hopefully I've helped you understand that. I want to go back to the PowerPoint and wrap up and then see if I've gone over. I haven't even looked at the time. Although I look at Marshall, I figure Marshall will confront
You're doing
me,
just
right?
fine on time, James. You're doing just fine today.
That's because I didn't breathe. And I was talking really fast. Now, if you want to, this is being recorded, so you just play it back like at half speed, and it will sound like a normal person. I get excited because I'm very passionate about this technology, and I get going. So, so you've Office Center Financials. Again, that's another technology that we have, and we have presentations recorded on that, and we strongly recommend you consider, because as you've seen what we are able to do with job cost forecasting, forecasting revenue, all that, we can do that from a general ledger perspective, and more. There's a lot that you can do, and the Office Center Financials takes where the legacy financials is functional. It's very good, but we take it to that next level and are able to do things like looking back over 10 years and even doing financials for future months, which is useful at the this time of the year. These are the products that we talked about. Again, if you want to be able to do all the things that I've talked about here today, and even to be able to create your own content, then Sage offers something called the Power Pack, which is, if you have Query Designer, you get Query Designer, Write Designer, and Import Designer plus Financials. So there's an attractive price. If you already have Query, and now you're thinking, wow, these other products could really do a lot for me, you can talk to them about adding the additional capabilities. And we want you to use this technology, so we'll do what we can to make that happen. Notice it says on the importing that it's a site license. So some people have misunderstand that, and they misunderstand the differences between writing and importing. Going back to that spreadsheet I just ended with, there were statuses, like the date or something, or the status, like unstarted or in progress or whatever. To change those in Sage, that's the right capability. You're changing a value that you would probably done on a screen, in setup and jobs or something. Import is your detail. So direct cost entries, journal entries, accounts payable invoices, payroll time, miscellaneous worksheet entries. That's import. Well, it's a site license. You have the capability, or you don't. But once you have it, you can use it in a lot of different ways. But we don't actually import the data. We just do a part. We're essentially doing the part that the programmer who built this. Like, let's say I was going to enter an estimate. So see the screen? Like, if I enter a bunch of data, is it in Sage? No, it's here. Well, I'm in Sage, so I guess it's kind of in Sage, but it's nowhere else in my system until I hit finish. Now, you may not think about what's happening when you hit finish, but I know what's happening when you hit finish. That is, the programmer who built this screen is sending your data to another program within Sage. And that program will make the decision whether this stuff gets in Sage or not. Now, it will, of course, the two people work together. I'll just tell you, by the way, programmers don't actually work together. All that, it's like accounting and operations. That same tension, the user interface programmers and the other people are the same way. But anyway, but you enter this data, and then when you hit finish, something happens. Well, the same thing's true. We're not entering the data on that screen. We're entering it in Excel, perhaps. So to get into Sage, the program you're using is import estimates or direct cost or commitments or miscellaneous worksheets. And that program will look at what you've created and it will put it in. When you use that program, you're using a use, in this case, you'd be using a use of job cost. Not for very long, it's fast, but it's a job cost functionality that's getting it in there. So I want to reinforce that.
Thank you, James. If anybody would like more information, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.